Good evening. A warm welcome to you all here at the Bildungswerk Berlin der Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung and on the screens in various locations. Last week, there were two depressing days of remembrance. October 7th marked the anniversary of the Hamas terror attack in Israel with over 1,100 fatalities and 250 hostages taken to Gaza. And October 9th was the 5th anniversary of the anti-Semitic terror attack in Halle with 2 dead and 2 injured. At every commemoration, the question arises as to whose narrative or narratives dominate the shared memory. Too often, it is the perspectives and statements of governments or the majority society. Ismet Tekin, one of the survivors of Halle, said last week in an interview in the daily newspaper Die Taz, we victims may have been heard, but not listened to. What unites us that we don't just want to hear the voices of the survivors, we want to listen to them. I'm very grateful that Edut 710 is building up this impressive archive of testimonies and giving us the opportunity to listen tonight. There should be many more initiatives like this. We hear about war and many dead, injured people every day. But who listens to the voices of the victims and the survivors? If these voices from Gaza, from Israel, Lebanon, Ukraine, and Sudan could no longer be ignored, perhaps many more people would put pressure on the warring parties to finally put an end to the murderous wars. I know it sounds a bit naive, but the fight for narratives is definitely central. There's a lot of fake news about October 7th, untrue allegations, and far-fetched interpretations. The archive of testimonies, which contains many different perspectives on the events of those affected, provides an important basis for an honest appraisal. We will hear descriptions of horrific experiences that will certainly be received and processed very differently by all of us. It is important to us that we treat each other with particular sensibility and respect this evening. My name is Inga Börjesson. I'm the director of the Bildungswerk Berlin der Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, and I would like to thank our cooperation partners, Edut 107, the Moses Mendelssohn Center, Potsdam, and the New Israel Fund Germany for giving us an insight into this important work today. And I would like to thank my colleagues, Christian, Pauline, and Teresa, who are giving me a wonderful support with the technology and the organization. And I would like to point out that there will be a consecutive translation from German into English if necessary. So please feel encouraged to ask questions in German during the Q&A. Lisa will translate them. Vielleicht jetzt nochmal auf Deutsch. Also es gibt die Möglichkeit, wenn jemand sich nicht zutraut oder ein schlechtes Gefühl hat, auf Englisch was zu fragen, das würde dann von Deutsch auf Englisch übersetzt werden. Und auch wenn jemand unsicher ist, ob alles verstanden wird, kann er sich auch zu Lisa setzen und zwischendurch Fragen stellen. Also, Lisa, kannst du kurz? Ja, gerne. So, before I hand over to Amir Teilhaber from the New Israel Fund, I would like to mention following. Unfortunately, we realized too late that the second part of the Festival of Resilience of the survivors and relatives of the attack in Halle was taking place in the Festsaal Kreuzberg at the same time as our event here. It was not possible to schedule our event. Ooh. Okay, now please, Amir. Oh, du. Okay.
Alles gut. I'm not Amir, I'm Miriam. Hi. We had a last minute change of plans. Welcome also from my side. I'm Miriam Rürup. I'm a historian and director of the Moses Mendelssohn Center, so one of the cooperation partners. And I welcome you very warmly to this evening, both in person and online. I just wanted to say a few words of how this event came together maybe, and of how we are going to structure the evening, so you know what to expect. So when we thought about this event, it started in Potsdam, I must say, because Yael Netzer, who's sitting to your left, Yael Netzer is currently our Hilde Robinson guest fellow. And she's been working, we've been in contact with her for quite a while, a few years, as a DH fellow in digital humanities. And after October 7th, we exchanged a lot of emails and text messages, etc., thinking about each other and inquiring about each other. And she kept telling me about this ongoing and developing project. So when she came to Berlin or Potsdam 2 months ago, she already mentioned that her colleague from the same organization, Edut Schwamot Wesel, Rana Kar, would be here in October, and whether we could not do an event. So I thought, yes, that's a very helpful, very good idea. And I thought, since the Moses Mendelssohn Center is a research center, we do research in Israel studies, in the history of Zionism, history of German Jewry mainly, but also European Jewry. But we don't really do events on current politics. Nevertheless, as researchers and some of us Jews, but especially with strong ties to Israel and Palestine, we had the urge to do something. So this came in very with a big welcome on our side, also because we do a lot of work with oral history, ideas and documents from National Socialism. So the idea of thinking of how does this format help us today was another idea of bringing this together. And then I was very happy when Amir Teilhaber, or let's say the New Israel Fund, and Amir Teilhaber is here, our moderator this evening for the New Israel Fund. He's I think the English title would be co-chair of the New Israel Fund. And when the New Israel Fund agreed to get together, and I'm very grateful to the Bildungswerk, the Heinrich Böll Foundation, to have this event here, because I think that's really a fantastic cooperation on these different pillars that are needed in talking about this project. So thank you both for being here with us tonight and for presenting us the project. So the idea is now that I'll sit down and be a participant and listener and a part of the audience, just like you, and that Yael Netzer, I already introduced her as a DH fellow, and Rana Kar, who is a legal scholar and also DH person, digital humanities person, but who are both very active and involved in Edut Schwamot Wesel from the beginning on. But the two of them are gonna tell us of how this grassroots organization came together and what they built. They are gonna show clips, as was just mentioned. And after about a presentation, introduction of some 45, 50 minutes, more or less, we'll get together here in the front, and Amir Teilhaber is gonna chair a kind of roundtable discussion or conversation. And then we are gonna open, of course, also for the audience. Also online, and you can ask and type your questions, remarks, whatever in the chat if you have any, and we'll try to also bring them up front here. So for now, thank you very much, and we are looking forward to your presentation.
Hi, very exciting to be here. My name is Rana Kar, and I'm from the Hebrew University. That's my day job, and my night job, or all the year-round job in the last 12 months has been working on constructing the archive of testimonies of Edut 710. I joined Edut 710 4 days after the October 7 attack. I heard of a group of people that knew each other already from the days of who remembers that now, but the judicial overhaul that preceded the October 7 events, unrelated, but came before that. There were a group of documentarists and activists that were documenting the protests in Israel, the democratic protest in Israel. And when October 7 occurred, they decided to shift their gaze toward documenting. They didn't know at the beginning what they were going to document, but there was a surge of documentary initiatives when October 7 happens. The technological availability already from the events themselves made documentation very accessible and very possible, let's say. And very quickly, you can see here, even if you don't read the Hebrew, October 8th, October 9th, this group is cohering into what will become Edut 710 and deciding that what they're going to do, what we're going to do, is document testimonies by video of survivors of the events. Our estimation was that there are about 70,000 affected people in the direct circle of the events. And until now, we documented 1,200 of them, and we're still going on. And that's when I heard about this amazing project. It was on October 11. I've been researching or using tools from digital humanities to analyze testimonies of Holocaust survivors, so the big archives of Holocaust survivors. And I heard about this initiative because of the joint roots of the motivation for documentation. And that's where I joined in. And I think separately from me, Yael, but we worked together at the Center of Digital Humanities at the Hebrew University, and it became an essential part of the way we dealt with things since October 7. So I want to start with a testimony that will maybe put us into the mode of what happened on October 7. We will show 4 testimonies, very different from one another. All these testimonies are hard. They're not visual. You will see only a person talking, but if you listen, as Inga said very beautifully, if you actually listen to the testimonies, they're deeply affecting and triggering. So I'm just want to give you this warning beforehand. That's the map of those of you who are less familiar. Maybe I'll go back here. That's Jerusalem, that's Gaza, the Gaza Strip and the Gaza envelope, what we call the Gaza Gürtel, the Gaza envelope. That's where things took place. Driving from Jerusalem to the Gaza envelope is about an hour and a half when there's traffic, not more. That's what we're talking about, an hour and a half. And that's a closer map. All the points here are the moshavim, the kibbutzim, and the cities that were affected. All these points are of incidents that took place by the invasion from Gaza. And we're going to watch now a testimony from a rabbi from Ofakim, one of the biggest cities that were invaded. Look how far it is. It's more than 20 kilometers away, and they reached all the way there. So we'll hear the first testimony.
שישי בערב שמחת תורה, שמחה גדולה בעיר אופקים, כל הקהילה רוקדת יחד עם בחורה מכינה באופקים, סביב ספרי התורה, שמחים. הדבר הבא, 6:30 הבוקר, אנחנו מתעוררים כמו כל תושבי הדרום למטח של אזעקות ונפילות. אז אחרי כשאנחנו נכנסים ויוצאים מהממ"דים, אני פותח את הוואטסאפ שלי בשבת קודש, בחג, ואני מסתכל, מחפש לראות בקבוצת וואטסאפ של הכיתת כהנות שלי בעוטף עזה לקבל עדכון. הוא כותב לנו בקבוצה, חברים, חשש לפשיטה. כולם עולים על ציוד ונשקים, וברגע שהירי נגמר, אנחנו מתחילים סריקות במרחב. אני מעדכן את אשתי, ואומרת לי, פשיטה? לא הבנתי, מי פושט על מי? כאילו, הם פושטים. אני מעדכן את דן שכמובן אם צריך אני מגיע. ואז תוך כמה דקות האירוע משתנה. ונכנסים כמה מאות מטרים מכאן. 3 טנדרים עמוסים במחבלים חמושים מכף רגל ועד ראש. ב-RPG, טילי לאו, טיל מגד מסוקים, רימונים, קלצ'ניקוב. הם נכנסים כמה מאות מטרים מכאן. 2 מהם פונים ימינה ונוסעים בכיוון הזה. אחד מהם נכנס מתוך השכונה. כשהם רואים את הבתים של היהודים, הם מתחילים לבצע ירי. ובעצם למעשה שומע שהירי מתבצע כאן 200 מטר, 250 מטר ממני, אווירי. בהתחלה אתה עדיין לא קולט את זה. אתה חושב מה זה, נפצים, כאילו שהבוקר באמצע מטחי קסאמים, מי מפעיל נפצים? ואז אתה שומע את האוטומט, אתה מזהה את זה מהשירות הצבאי. אני אומר לאשתי להיכנס לממ"ד, לוקח את האקדח האישי שלי, לוקח כובע זיהוי של כיתת כהנות, ויוצא רגלי לכיוון הירי. אני לא לוקח את הרכב אפילו, כי אני מבין שזה ממש קרוב. אז אנחנו בריצה מהירה תוך כדי תפס המחסות. באחד מהקפיצה ממחסה למחסה, כשאני עם אקדח מופנה קדימה וכדור בקנה, אני מזהה דמות מולי, ממש בשבריר שנייה. המחבלים הגיעו עם מדים של צה"ל, הגיעו עם וסטים. המחבלים לא הגיעו עם שלט, אני מחבל טיראבי. ואז מגיע איזשהו רגע מסוים שאין לך זיהוי ודאי. שאתה לא יורה, כי אולי זה עוד אחד מכוחותינו שנכנס לרחוב ואתה לא... ובשבריר הזה הוא יורה ראשון, הוא יורה צרור. בצרור הזה אני חוטף כדור ברגל, נפצע בירך, בחלק העליון של הירך. אני מדדה על רגל ימין, צועק לחבר'ה שמאחוריי, נפצעתי, קיבלתי כדור ברגל, ואז אני נוחת על הבטן, ככה, בצורה שאני מחזיק את האקדח עם 2 ידיים, על הבטן, ממשיך להסתכל קדימה. לימיני, נהוראי נהרג, בצרור הזה או בצרור שאחריו, כמה מטרים קדימה יותר, כנראה שהוא הספיק עוד להתקדם קצת. נהוראי נופל בקרב בזמן הזה. אחרי כמה זמן אני רואה שעדיין המחבל לא מתקרב, אני מוצא את הפלאפון מהכיס שלי, מיד שמאל, מניח אותו ליד הראש שלי, ואז אני מבצע 4 שיחות. השיחה הראשונה הייתה בעצם הקלטת וואטסאפ, לוואטסאפ השכונתי פה של הקהילה שלנו. הרב שולח הודעת וואטסאפ בשבת, אני מניח שזה יעשה הד, אז כל מי שרק יראה, יתלבט אם לפתוח או לא, אולי יראה שאני כותב את הוואטסאפ, אז כולם בטח יפתחו. ואני מקליט שם, חברים, מחבלים בשכונה, קיבלתי כדור ברגל, כולם ייכנס למרחבים מוגנים, לא לצאת. זו הייתה ההקלטה הראשונה. לאחר מכן, השיחה השנייה הייתה לרב שץ, החבר שלי בעוטף עזה, 20 קילומטר מכאן, שהוא זה שהקפיץ אותי בהתחלה, ואני אומר לו, דן, תבין את האירוע. זה לא פשיטה שהמחבלים יוצאים מעזה. הם כבר כאן באופקים. קיבלתי כדור ברגל מקלצ'ניקוב, המחבלים 20 קילומטר מאחוריך. הוא בהלם, הוא מספר את זה לחבר שלידו, טל ממן. אמר לו, הרב שלך קיבל כדור ברגל באופקים עכשיו. אחרי שעה, שניהם יהרגו בקרב במבטחים. יכול להיות שהייתי האחרון שדיבר איתם. לאחר מכן שיחת טלפון השלישית, זה לאשתי ולילדים. אני שוכב על הרצפה ואני לא יודע איפה המחבלים עוד מסתובבים. אולי הם כבר הגיעו לבית, אולי הגיעו לרחובות. אני מתקשר אליהם לאבישג, מחבלים בשכונה, להיכנס למעמד, קיבלתי כדור ברגל אבל הכל בסדר. השיחה הרביעית, זה למוקדן של מד"א, 101. אני מתאר לו מה קורה, מחבלים באופקים, קיבלתי כדור ברגל, אני שרוע על הרצפה, ברחוב. וכל זה תחת ירי ידיים, והידיים אדם מחזיק את האקדח, מלווה מבט, מחכה כל רגע שיתקרב מישהו.
So I think that gives you some glimpse to the shock that was entailed in the morning of October 7. And I think that also from watching this 5 minutes clip, I should just say that every testimony that we collect is being edited for the full form, which is basically the length of the interview. It's usually about an hour. We don't limit the witnesses, but that's about the average length of the testimonies. But in order to make the testimonies accessible, we also cut a 5 minutes summary or highlight of each testimony, and that's what you've seen now. We put everything online on our YouTube and our website because it relates to our goals in this project. So what are the goals of Edut 710? First of all, to listen and record the stories of these people and to make them feel safe to tell their stories. So the stories are told almost in an uninterrupted manner. We usually ask 3 questions. What were you doing on October 6th? As you heard from this testimony, it was Simchat Torah, a holiday in Israel. People were celebrating, religious, secular, it doesn't matter. People were celebrating with the families. It really was an important factor in the events that went on to unfold on October 7. The second question that we ask is, what happened to you on October 7? And then we usually ask a following question of, where are you now? And that's the question that changes, or the answer to which changes the most as we progress in time from the testimonies. Our first testimony has been taken 6 days after the attack. So we have a testimony from October 13 already. You can just imagine that the testimonies change really greatly if they were given 6 days after the attack and a year after the events. So our first goal is to listen and record in their own words, uninterrupted, giving the witnesses a safe space to tell their story and to make stories available and accessible to a wide range of audiences. Part of what we do now is in our Yurtzeit events is to make the testimonies available also to non-English or Hebrew speakers audiences. So these testimonies were translated, thanks also to the Moshe Mendelssohn Zentrum, in order to make them accessible to other languages and other audiences. We have a view toward the long-term preservation, and Yael will talk a lot about it. How do we build the archive from day one, not in retrospect, but from day one? How do we collect the data in a way that will make this? I'm a Holocaust scholar, so I research testimonies that were given 50 years ago. I want the scholar of 50 years from now to be able to access and do the research in the most advanced tools, and that requires building an archive from today, from a year ago, and that's exactly what Yael and Keren, our partner, are doing in Edut 710. And we're guided by the highest ethical and professional guidelines and standards. What does it mean? It means that every witness that we go to, we don't chase witnesses, we don't convince witnesses. We're not here for hasbara, for propaganda, or for journalistic purposes. We're here for the long term. And it means that we're not chasing, the high-valued witnesses that make it to the news. It's not what we're interested in. If they want to give testimony, we will, of course, listen to them too. We're interested in everybody and anybody, without hierarchies. We don't account for who was more of a hero, who is telling a better story or a more moving story. It's not what we're interested in. Our interest is to listen to these voices and to document them. And it means that with every testimony, with every witness, we have twice the process of getting their consent. in advance, beforehand, before the interview, as the law requires, but also after we finish editing this 5 minutes version that you just saw, we go back to the witness. And we do it all the time in collaboration with the witness to say, are you still feeling okay with that? Is this the way you think you want to come out to the world? Because this goes on YouTube and that's out there. So we really try to do everything in collaboration with the witnesses and with the communities. We're very much inspired by Dori Laub, a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor who established the Fortune of Yale archive of Holocaust testimonies. And Dori Laub had his agenda in a way, or his inspiration is the ethics of listening to the testimonies. And I'm quoting here just one thing of what he said: to enable the process of giving testimony, involvement and intimate presence of the listener are required. Testimonies are not monologues. They do not exist in isolation. Witnesses are speaking to someone. They have been waiting for a long time. I know that in the cut version, you saw only a monologue in a way, but what happens during the testimony is that our crew, all volunteers, we had more than 400 volunteers, come and sit with the witness and give him this hour to speak, to tell their own narrative. And we believe that this is part of the therapeutic process that the witness goes through, because they're allowed to, or they're given the opportunity to regain control over the narrative, to tell the story in their own terms. And we're following here, of course, the method or the way that Dori Laub put things. So some of our basic principles and challenges, maybe I'll begin with the challenges. We are dealing even now, a year after, with things that are raw, completely raw. It's not post-trauma in a way, it's still the trauma. There are still more than 100 kidnapped people in Gaza. Communities are dispersed. People are exiled from their homes. Most of the people did not return to their original residence in the Otef, in the envelope, Gaza envelope. So our basic principles is to give every survivor a chance and an opportunity to tell their stories with no interruptions, with no hierarchies. And we have the consent and collaborations of the witnesses and their communities. And if I put it from the more academic or archival side, we put the witnesses and the testimonies before the data, even if it means that we compromise, the professional best practices of data. We remember that first and foremost, we have people in front of us. I want to show now three witnesses, two testimonies that will speak about the Nova Festival. One of them is of a survivor of the Nova Festival, a festival goer, and the other is two Bedouins that rescued people from the festival. And we will see the testimonies back to back, so it will be quite, a few minutes chunk. I just want you to remember, as you listen to it, look at the proximity between these two places, how you already can see the multiple points of view that building such an archive allows, because we are talking about the same event, but from two completely different perspectives. In fact, one does not even know of the other in a way. But through the archive, through our initiative, we start building this network of stories.
ואני מתמקמת במקדימה של הרחבה, עם רותם, עם נינה, מרימה את רותם על הכתפיים, אני אוהבת לעשות את זה, ואנחנו בשיא, ומתחילה הזריחה, וזה החלק הכי יפה בטרנס. ופתאום התחילו אזעקות. עכשיו אנחנו בעוטף, הכל טוב, אזעקות, כאילו, יהיה בסדר. ואז פתאום מתחיל לקרות דברים אחרים. את מתחילה לשמוע רעשים אחרים, ירי אחר, פתאום מגיע פצוע, ואת רואה מלא דם. פתאום את שומעת צרחה, תרוצו, הם פה. כזה, ואת מתחילה לשמוע טו 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 לכיוונך. ואת מתחילה להרגיש את זה. ופה הבנת שאת נכנסת לסרט. ואנשים מתחילים לרוץ, ואני רואה שרותם תקועה בתוך גדר תיל, ואני חוזרת לרותם, ואני קוראת לה את המכנס, ואני אומרת ללינה, אבל לרוץ, אין זמן! אנחנו רצות בטירוף, כאילו, לכיוון הזה. רצות בטירוף. ואת מרגישה את זה, אני ממש טוענת שזה עבר לי ליד התנוחים של האוזניים. ממש, זה אפילו לא, זה לא שריקה. זה ממש הרגשתי דברים. רצנו בטירוף לכיוון אחד, ואז זה מגיע משם, אז את רצה לכיוון ההוא. ואז פתאום מגיעים לך טנדרים ואופנועים, אז את רצה לכיוון ההוא. ואנחנו רצות, קרוב לשעה, בתוך המטווח הזה. באיזשהו שלב הבנו שאנחנו חייבות לרוץ לאוטו. דפקנו ריצה, ואת כבר במסלול מכשולים, זה כבר ים של גופות, כאילו. זה כבר להיתקע בכפות רגליים, כפות ידיים, ראשים. עלינו לאוטו, הגענו לאוטו, הצטרף אלינו בחור בשם דניאל, שאנחנו לא מכירות, לא כלום. את יודעת, כולם רצים. איפה שיש מקום, עולים. זה לא רכב שאמור לשרוד כלום, ואני נוסעת איתו, והוא חוטף יריות, ואני במהירות צי, והוא על זה. והרכב מציל אותנו. לחצתי על הגז, אמרתי, לא משנה מה, אני חייבת להגיע לכביש. על הכביש יהיה את הצבא. אני מגיעה לכביש בדרך לא דרך, כזה בום, כזה, קפיצה על הכביש, פונה ימינה, רואה בקצה של העין את השלט של קיבוץ רעים, הירוק, לוחצת על הגז, מגיעה לצומת של קיבוץ רעים על 180 אולי, עשרות רכבים הפוכים, ומלא אנשים מתים מולי. מלא גופות על הרצפה, מסביב לג'יפ הירוק היה מלא גופות עירומות. ואני מקבלת צרור בצד שמאל של הרכב, לא יודעת מאיזה סוג של כלי, אבל בשורה התחתונה מקבלת צרור של יריות לצד שמאל של הרכב, שזה מרגיש שזה בפנים, זה הרגיש לי בין הרגליים שלי, לחצתי על הגז, ופשוט התחלתי לדרוס גופות, כאילו. פשוט התחלתי לדרוס כמויות אדירות של גופות. אני הבנתי שאני חייבת לרדת לשטח חזרה, שגם הכביש מסוכן, ושבכביש אני יותר חשופה. פניתי חזק ימינה, באמת לא יודעת איך לא התהפכנו. אני לא יודעת איך האוטו הזה לא הרג אותנו, כאילו. פניתי חזק ימינה, איך שעליתי על השטח, מגיע מאחורינו אופנוע, טק, יורה לנו במאחורה, מפנצ'ר לי את כל 4 גלגלים. מגיעות לשטח, אפילו לא יוצא את האוטו, צורחת, תפקירו עכשיו, ורצות שמאלה חזק, ראינו שם איזה גבעה, נשכבנו, כולנו אחד על השני, רותם על הגב, אני חצי על רותם, חצי על הבטן, מאחוריי דניאל, מתחתיי לינה, תופסת לי את הרגליים, ואנחנו נשכבים בערך 8:30, 8:45 בבוקר, ולא זזים. אז באמת היינו סטטיות לחלוטין, את מרגישה את זה בלמעלה של הראש, עובר מעלייך, את שומעת את הכדורים פוגעים בעץ מאחורינו, לא זזות, לא נושמות, לא משתעלות. באיזשהו שלב, לקראת 5:45, קיבלתי טלפון של אהד לאופר. הוא כתבתי אותו חילוץ אמן. חילוץ אמן. בקטע הזה. היחידי, שלחתי לו מיקום, 45 דקות אחר כך, הרים עליי טלפון. אני הולך להגיע, לצעוק קייטלין, תרוצו אליי. התחלנו לרוץ, נכנסנו לג'יפ מלא בדם, ג'יפ לבן, מלא בדם. פינו אותנו לקיבוץ פטיש, והגענו הביתה באיזה 1 בלילה, 2 בלילה. והחיים ממשיכים. אין אופציה לא לקום, אין אופציה לא להמשיך. בטח ובטח אחרי שהצלחת לצאת מהחר הזה, כאילו.
המשפחה שלי, אבא שלי זכרונו ודודים וכל המשפחה שלי הם כבר עובדים בעוטף מעל 60 שנה היום בשדות. בחקלאות, בקיבוצים, ברפתות, בכל מיני עבודה של הקיבוצים בעוטף, הם עובדים שם יותר מ-60 שנה. אז מכירים כל דרך של שדה, דרך עפר, מכירים יעני, יום יום אנחנו כבר שם. אנחנו בנקודת הוועד הזה בין קיבוץ ברי לקיבוץ רעים. איפה המסיבה? אנחנו ממש באמצע, בין שתי הקיבוצים האלו. ושומעים את הרעש של הקסאמים, שומעים גם שתי הליקופטרים למעלה, שומעים ירי, אנחנו כבר קרובים. ראינו שם הרכב עומד, ממש ליד החורשה. כשהתקרבנו לו יותר, אז הוא הכיר אותנו ואנחנו גם היינו מכירים אותו. אבא שלו הוא חבר טוב של המשפחה שלי. שאלנו אותו מה אתה עושה כאן, הוא אומר יש הרבה צעירים וצערות שברחו מהמסיבה, ואני מנסה לעזור להם. אמרנו לו טוב, קודם כל אנחנו משתלבים. אנחנו נותנים איתך יד ועזרים לכל אחד שאנחנו יכולים לעזור. אנחנו יוצאים מהחורשה לכיוון יותר למעלה, אנחנו מכירים אותה, מן גבעה כזאת של תצבית שאתה יכול לראות את הכל. התחלנו לעזור לצעירים האלו, להגיע לחורשה, לאסוף, להביא אותם לתצבית. עוד הפעם, כשהיינו מגיעים לנקודת התצבית, היו מגיעים הרבה רכבים מאזור אופקים, פטיש, מסלול, כל מקום. כל רכב היה מגיע, אנחנו היינו מבקשים ממנו, אחרי שמוודאים שהוא יהודי ישראלי, היינו מבקשים ממנו, בבקשה ממך, האם אתה יכול לקחת את הצעירים האלו לתחנת איסוף במושב פטיש או בתחנת המשטרה באופקים. עכשיו, הצעירים האלו, את יודעת, הם היו ממורמרים, הם היו צמים, היו בוכים, היו עייפים, ואת הדבר שאנחנו עשינו אותו, היה לנו הרבה מים. נתנו להם מים לשתות, שטפנו להם פנים, עדדנו אותם וגם חבקנו אותם, וירדנו להם את כל הבחד שיש להם, בחיבוק, בדיבור, וחלק גדול לא היה לו טלפונים. נתנו להם את הטלפונים שלנו, שהתקשרו להורים שלהם, והמשכנו בתעסוקה הזאת אולי שעתיים פלוס, שעתיים וחצי, 3. וכל הזמן הזה אני מתכתב משם בטלפון. זה דרך אגב, זה הנהג דאעש, בוא שב כאן. המשכנו את הנסיעה שלנו בחורשות, ראינו שם רכבים של הצד השני של חמאס. ראינו דברים לא טובים בתוך החורשות, ואני קשה להסביר את זה, כי זה לפעמים עושה לכאב.
אז ידעתי פחות או יותר, הוא צמוד לאנטנה מרחק מעבר לכביש, עניין של 30 מטר מהכביש. מעבר לאנטנה והכביש. אז מפה כבר אני יודע איזה כיוון אני הולך.
הלכנו לשטח של הבוטנים, שאלתי אותו, מה אתה רואה? אנחנו לא מצליחים לאתר אותך. אמרתי לו, אתה יודע, מה תן לי תמונה? לא מצליחים לאתר אותך, תן לנו תמונות, תצלם ותשלח לנו. אז הוא שלח לנו תמונה, באמת זה היה השטח של הבוטנים. אוקיי, אנחנו בשטח של הבוטנים, אמרתי לו, מה אתה רואה עוד? הוא אומר, אני רואה 3 גונדולות הגדולות שאוספים בהם בוטנים. פתחנו את התמונה, אני יושב מאחורה, קדמתי קדימה באמצע המושב, פתחנו את התמונה. אמרתי, אם זה הנקודה של הגונדולות, ואם זה הנקודה של התמונה, אז אנחנו פה באמצע עכשיו. אז הוא צריך להיות שם. הלכנו לכיוון איפשהו מוסתר. אמרתי לו, אתה צריך לראות אותנו, אנחנו עם ג'יפ לבן לנדוקרוס. הוא הציע את היד, ראינו אותו, רצנו לכיוון שלו, פתחנו דלתות, קפצו שתיהם לאוטו.
החלטתי שאני לא נוסע לכיוון היציאה, אני נוסע לכיוון הצבא. התקרבנו, שכולנו רגועים, כולנו עם ידיים, חוץ ידיים מחוץ לחלונות. 30 מטר מהצבא, מגיע 2 חיילים, עכשיו כל החיילים שמה.
החיילים שלבו את הנשק, זה הקטע שאני לא יכול לשכוח אותו.
שלנו. לא מאשים אותם, כי הם לא ידעו בכלל.
כולם שלבו את הנשק בבת אחת לכיוון שלנו. אנחנו צרחנו עליהם בחזרה, אל תורו עלינו, אנחנו אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו תושבי הדרום, אנחנו מרהט, אנחנו באנו להציל, אנחנו הצלנו את הבחורה והצלנו את הבחור.
אז התקרבו לנו שני חיילים, אנחנו במרחק של 30 מטר מכל הגדוד שהיה שם. שני חיילים שהגיעו אלינו, הם עם נשק גם, כמו שכולם שלוף, גם הם עם נשק שלוף, ומדברים אותנו ואנחנו צועקים ומדברים אותם, אז שכבנו כולנו על הרצפה. התקרבו עניין של 10 מטר מאיתנו, התחילו גם לצעוק ולדבר, מה מביא אתכם לכאן, איך הגעתם לכאן, מי אתם? אז נרגעו קצת, ואחד מהם דיבר עם איה, חשבו, הוא דיבר איתה בצד, חשבו שאנחנו חטפנו אותה. אז היא אמרה להם לא, הם חבר'ה טובים, הם הגיעו לעזור, הם עזרו לי, והם גם קודם היו עוזרים לאנשים אחרים. ואז הוא אמר לכל החיילים שהיו שם, להוריד נשק. והתחברנו לכביש, שזה רעים תל אור, רעים אורים. ראינו גם בכל מיני, בדרך עצמה, אופנוענים ואנשים גם יוריים. מתים, מה זה יוריים? אין פה חיים. מה שהתרחש זה לא מקובל על הדת של אף בן אדם.
So just to conclude my part, where we're standing today, we have more than 1,200 testimonies filmed, 400 of them published in Hebrew on our website and our YouTube channel, 120 translated to English, and now the anticipated translation to more languages. We have a bilingual website that you're welcome to look at, highest standards of digital archiving that Yael will talk about soon. We have drone and 360 filming of 12 locations that took place, all by volunteers again, immediately after the events. So under Army escort, about 3 weeks, 4 weeks after the events. And it was really important for us to go and film then when there were still, shootings, not that now there aren't, there still are, but really under fire. Our photographers, our documentaries went to take these photographs, these drones and 360, because we knew that things won't stay the same, and they already did change. Houses ruined, these safe shelters moved or cleaned. So we have all this documentation. We have another project, Yael will talk about soon, of 6 local defense squad stories that reconstructed and filmed. And we're collaborating with startups, technological companies, archives, and projects in the field in order to really create this network of stories that will enable us to really get the fuller picture of what happened on October 7, that day.
So just to get a bit technical in this slide, at the beginning, as Rana said, we joined this initiation in the first week of after October 7th, and we realized that with our profession, and our experience, we know how to make archives and what does it mean, and what does it take to make a digital archive, and not just a collection of testimonies that they need to be taken care of in a good way. So we kind of created a model of how do we see this archive. We have testimonies, we have the witnesses, we have the staff that is doing the interviews, and we have a process of editing. So there's a research of getting to know who are the witnesses are, then interviewing them, and we have a raw material. Then it's being edited to the long version and the short version. It's being transcribed. So we have SRT for the texts of these interviews. And there's a content editing, people who are watching these interviews and extracting the main theme for the description that you may see later on YouTube. But also, not only that, they also find who are mentioned in this, who are the people that are mentioned in these interviews, and write them down. So we create the same with locations and organizations. So the result is a full documentation of the process. And this is important both for the archive and also for the present. So because the transcription gives access to the documents. It enables a search. And the short version enables people, the witnesses, to share their testimonies, because it is not expected from everyone to watch like 1 hour testimony, even of your friends or family. So, and with that, we also create a full listings of the people and of the people that are giving the testimonies, and the people and location mentioned. And this is really important for the provenance of this archive. So in 50 years, when someone will search the archive, it will have context, and we will know exactly who are the people that are mentioned. So, okay. So this is, it's partly in Hebrew, but you see, this is like, for instance, we have a place called Kisufim. So the witnesses from Kisufim there are a few of them. A testimony can have more than one person. So we have a few testimonies where more than one person is present. So it can be families or friends, or perhaps an older person with her caretaker. So there are also, and this may be in 2 languages as well. And also there's like, and all of these are connected. For instance, they're telling about a person. So Sar Margolis was the head of the, how do you call it? The security, the defense squad. And he died, but he's mentioned in most of these testimonies. And this is an important thing, because because events happened in a community, and the giving there are 2 ways to give an expression to the community events. One is doing the from filming many testimonies, but also filming them in place and trying to build a story from this from the collection of these testimonies. So this is one way to reconstruct and to enable the community to know its own events, what happened. Because in many cases, not only that they did not know, they also, like after October 7th, they went to different places, and they did not, the community not always existed the same way. But we try to reconstruct it also with our digital tools. So we use a term from digital humanities. So this is the way, one of the ways to do research in humanities in these days, with digital tools and computational tools, which enable us to see a lot of things together, like a big data process. But also it can be used both for the research, but also for the people themselves. So we use this notion of close reading or close listening, because we listen to the people, but we listen also to the many voices. And the listening to the many voices is enabled by the manuscripts the transcriptions that we collect, and finding the people that are mentioned. So for instance, similarly, this is like a social network of mentions. So we see every node in this graph is either a person who gives the testimony, or people that are mentioned in the testimonies. And this is a way to find like central people in the event. So you can tell that it may be the commander of the civil society of the defense squad, or yeah, Ophir Lipschen is the consul, the head of the consul of this area. So this is one way, which is good, good assistance to the research, but it is also good for the people of these communities who can like try to find or locate what have happened. And another example is like, this is a very shallow word cloud of the transcriptions, but this word cloud already shows you, for instance, that the army is not present. So we can see terrorists and we can see kibbutz, but we don't see the army and we don't see soldiers as the main words that come in the testimonies. And one of the words that we do see in a lot of the testimonies in the kibbutzim is the word door. And many of the testimonies from the kibbutzim, and this is a theme, goes to the word door. And I think we will see the next testimony, which gives an expression to this theme. So this is from kibbutz Nir Ol, which is very close to the border, and which suffered a lot of casualties, kidnapped, burned houses, and dead. We will see the next.
הבעל שלי, האקס שלי נמצא בעזה, והאח שלי נמצא בעזה. ויצאתי החוצה ואני רואה שנכנסים לקיבוץ נחיל של אנשים בשחור. חשבתי, שמחת תורה, מישהו בא לחגוג איתנו. וזהו, והבנתי שגם לנו יש מחבלים. לא תיארתי לעצמי שזה יגיע, זה אף פעם לא קרה. ונכנסתי לחדר ביטחון, והנכדות נכנסו מתחת למיטה, והן אומרות לי, סבתא, מה קרה? סבתא, מה קרה? כזה. ואני מנסה לסגור את הדלת של החדר ביטחון, ואני לא מצליחה. אני לא מצליחה. אוקיי. ואז אני מחזיקה בדלת שהם לא יפתחו, כי אני עילה פנימית. הם נכנסו לתוך הבית שלי. והם ניסו לפתוח, ואני נלחמת בהם. הם מורידים את הידית ואני מעלה אותה. הם מורידים ואני מעלה. אני בת 71, קיבינימט, אתם אנשים בני 30. אתם מצליחים, איך אתם, אני לא... והם חוטפים את העצבים של החיים, צורכים בתוך הבית שלי. ואני אומרת, איפה הצבא שלנו? איפה הצבא המפואר הזה שדיברו עליו? והם ירו, והנכדות שלי נורא נבהלו, כי הכדור עבר את הדלת ונתקע בקיר. 8 שעות של מאבק, שכל דקה זה נצח. נצח. ושרפו לה את כל הבית עד היסוד, והבת שלי בתוך חדר ביטחון, לי דנציג, לי מאור, סליחה. והיא יוצאת מחלון שרוף עם 3 בנות קטנות. ואז מגיע הימ"מ, ואבא שלה, של אחת הבנות, והם אומרים לי לפתוח את הדלת ואני לא פותחת. אמרתי להם, תלכו קיבינימט, אני לא פותחת לכם את הדלת. אנחנו היום, אמרתי להם, שום דבר. יצאנו מהממ"ד, צרחתי עליהם, על כל אמרתי, איפה הייתם? איפה הייתם? זה הסיפור, סיפור נורא עצוב. כל יום אני מתרסקת, כל יום אנחנו שומעים על עוד הרוגים. אני לא יודעת איך אני ממשיכה. אני יודעת שאם מסדרים לי את הבית בניר עוז, אני חוזרת. הילדים שלי כבר לא יחזרו. יצאתי החוצה, ראיתי שהקיר, הכלבה שלי, כנראה רצחו אותה, וכל הקיר דם ובלגנים. לקחו את הכלבה לפני שראיתי. ויצאתי החוצה וראיתי את ניר עוז שרופה. מה זה חילוץ? מי חילץ אותי? אני חילצתי את עצמי, לא חילצו אותנו. אני מאוד דואגת לאח שלי, כי כשהוא נכנס לממ"ד, אז הוא כל כך פוחד מערבים. אז הוא דפק את היד, שבר אותה כנראה, וחתך אותה בדלת של הממ"ד, והוא התקשר לאח אחר שלי ואמר לו, זהו, דני, זה הסוף, אני מת. זה הסוף, וזאת הייתה השיחה האחרונה. במלחמת יום כיפור הייתי בת 20, הרגו את כל החברים שלי. ועכשיו גם הרגו את כל החברים שלי. אנחנו מחכים לראות מה הלאה, יש לנו כל כך הרבה שם. המון. המון.
So just to sum, Rachel mentioned her brother who is still in Gaza, kidnapped, and her ex-husband, Alex Danzig, who was killed in Gaza and then brought to, his body was brought to Israel and now is buried there. So it must be mentioned that we are just waiting for and calling for the kidnapped to be back home. And I think it's just to sum why is what we do is important, because I think you can already get the impression that this talking of the people talking gives an expression, an ability to share, and not it's for the people, but also for even for those who do not give the testimony, but to other people to hear and understand what has happened. I think you will see, or as Rana mentioned, we have a connection with the witnesses. So for instance, on October 7th, this year, there were some events where witnesses came like to people's houses and in front of a small group retested or discussed their testimony. And of course, it will be a good source for, I think, things that were mentioned or we will discuss later about who owns the memory of what has happened. So I think this is for now. We have a lot of partners that help us do this project. We started as a volunteer, all based on goodwill of people and also of companies who helped us to give us infrastructure. And this is important for the transcription, for the translation, and for other management system. It's a lot of gigot, it's like almost more than 40 terabytes that we already have. So this is a lot of information to manage. And thank you for coming and listening to us.
Thank you, first of all, for your presentation and also talking us through the clips. I have a few questions which I would like to discuss with you, also with you, Miriam, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So to maybe 20 minutes talking on the panel now, and then we'll open it up for another 20 minutes or so. First of all, I wanted to ask you some questions about Edut 710. how do you self-organize, and how has your initiative grown to be an organization, I think one can say? And then also, how do people who want to share their testimonies find you? Do you find them ever? You said that you're not seeking special testimonies, but do you go out, reach out? And why do they speak, and why do they speak to you? And how has this, maybe also you mentioned how it's a different testimony if it was 7 days after or if it's a year after, but maybe you can also identify also through the metadata even how this has changed during the last year.
So I think we were just talking before that we were sitting in a cafe and we said that every day that passes, we think that the fact that we still exist as an organization, Edut 710, is a sheer miracle. And not because we're not good in organizing ourselves, but because it's really all about people giving their time and heart to this project. We're all volunteers in that. We all have our day jobs. And still we managed to build an organization that is, I'm very proud to be part of. We're running it as a business, really, as a multi-million business, multi-million-dollar business, with very little funds. And it's not just about the funding. It's really about people putting everything they have into listening to these people and putting out there the best version of these people that is possible. So in terms of self-organization, I mean, at the end, we have a small body of about 15 people that run the operation, and we are counting really on the power of volunteers that continue, even now, to join us and say, please, we want to help. And I think it has to do with what happened on October 7, that really there was no official response immediately. And many grassroots operations started back then. And if I can connect it to your question of why do people talk to us, I think that's what separates us or makes Edut 710 special. We knew that we don't want to be there for 1 month. Many people went out to document everything after October 7. They documented dogs, they documented materials, they documented houses, but you know, they put these things on a website and they built something very beautiful, and that's it, and it was done. And we knew that we want to be there for the long term. So when people tell their story, they want to tell it to someone that will take care of it, take good care of it. I think one indication to the seriousness with which we do our business in a way, to Yael and Karen's success in building our archive, is that we have a deposit agreement with the National Library of Israel that already consider us as a, you know, as a major partner in the documentation. So.
I will add 2 things. One is that we have WhatsApp groups, like 20 or 30 WhatsApp groups. So I think this is a very major organizational tool, yes. So, and so at first there was a reach out in Facebook and friends, and like on October 10th, we saw it in Facebook and we joined through that, because after October 7th, there was, like, I think it is not difficult to feel that what most civil citizens felt, that there is no government, that there is no, like, we are on our own and we do our things for ourselves in a way. So it was a lot of organizations of helping the displaced with food and the soldiers and clothing and places to live. And then, and so some people were recruited for that, and we recruited for that. But we felt that I know how to do archives and to collect information. So this is what I'm trying to find and to do. So this is one thing. And the other question about like, for instance, the metadata that you asked, is that it was obvious to us from the beginning that we need to know everything about, for instance, the witnesses. So we want to know what's their name and how they write their name and how they spell it in English. But at the beginning, for the interviewers, it was like they felt they cannot ask this question. Like, people are under trauma and you ask them how to spell their name, like, why? It doesn't matter. And then they figured, or the organization in a way figured that these are important things, that we cannot publish it if we don't know how to write your name. So this is like something that was also developed. And I think there's another issue about the organization as an organization, is that there's a lot of work being done here. And there was a question of to whom this work belongs. So this is also like a legal issue. So who has the rights on the testimonies? Is this the filmmaker, the person who films, the interviewer, the person, you know? So, and because there's such an organizational effort here that not everyone is on the field, but also in the background. So after a few months, it became a formal organization. So in order to enable us, whoever is involved, to have the legal rights on the creation.
Like a cooperative.
Yeah, like a cooperative.
And you mentioned that you started you joined on October 10th. Maybe you can tell us a bit about how and why and what has this work for both of you been on a personal level during the last year. And we saw some of the testimonies now. I think some of them were difficult to watch, and we only saw excerpts from them. I would imagine that if you see them in full, it can be quite difficult. How do you cope with this, and how do you stay empathetic, and how do you deal with desensitizing, maybe you, but also the other people who work for Edut 710?
How do we deal with that? So one of my volunteers told me, I'm so happy that I joined Edut because I don't know how to make sandwiches for soldiers. So in a way, I mean, the shock on October 8th was so huge. I couldn't go back to doing my research. I work on questions that are anyway dealing with mass atrocity and stuff like that, but it felt so remote. And the academic year has been postponed. Half the country was enlisted to the army. People just felt that they need to do something. And as Yael said, we found something that we're good at, or at least we can contribute best at. And that also answers to the question of what we call like the fear of secondary trauma. Of course, I mean, watching these testimonies day in and out does something to your soul, but also giving so much to something that is so important does something to offset the price that we pay. And now that we commemorated the 1 year yahrzeit of the events, we had many witnesses telling us how important it felt for them. I was in a visit to Kfar Aza, one of the communities most badly hurt. Well, all the communities were badly hurt, so there's no hierarchy here. And the people there were just, thanking us for coming and listening to their stories, because they didn't even know. Some of them said, we didn't even know that we want to, that we wanted to tell the story, that we wanted to share it. I think that what gives us, at least me, the energy to move forward, and to keep being engaged in that.
I think the answer is that very similar to Rana, is that in a way, time stopped at October 7th, and like it didn't have the same meaning as it had before. It was even a physical thing, like you can't breathe, you can't do anything. So being able to dedicate oneself to something and just do it, and do it in the nights and in Saturdays and weekends and days, just any free hour would just enable us to live in a way. So this is, it is as much as that. And on the other hand, I can say that for me, doing the archive or thinking about metadata, I didn't watch so many testimonies. I did watch, like, I guess more than most people, but not all the time. So it enabled me also to keep some distance from the content. So I can look at the infrastructure. I know I understand the infrastructure, but not the content. But as time passed, I started to see more and more. And also nobody can see everything. Like there are 1,200 testimonies. Nobody will see all of them. Yes.
That's why we bring in
And,
digital tools, because
Yeah.
we believe that that's the way to listen to all of them.
You mentioned secondary trauma, and I would like to go a little bit more into this topic of trauma. So you spoke about you don't watch, you don't watch all of them. You keep a bit of a distance. So how do you deal with this? I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, so I can't say if all of the people that we watched give testimony now are or were traumatized in the clinical sense, deeply impacted, of course. Is this something that you can see all across the board with the people who talk to you, who come talk with you? How do you deal as interviewers? How do you deal with this? And how do you deal with this on a maybe on a psychosocial level around when people talk and things come up, and that can be very unsettling for them also, and may leave them maybe even helpless in that moment.
So one of the things I think about the organization is that from the beginning, the well-being of both the witness and but mostly from the interviewers and the photographers was in focus. So first they were like before you went to do any interviews, you would have to get some instructions about how to deal with situations. And also there's always a group of people you can talk to. There's like by week, and every other week, there's a meeting of fellows who you can share your feelings. So there is like a support within the organization. And I think about the survivors, it depends. Some do get support and some don't, but it is the interviewers are instructed to be very sensitive to the situation and say, okay, if you cannot speak now, we will stop the interview. And it's also the interviewees can always also ask back in, like, if they after a few months they feel they uncomfortable with their testimony, we will take it off the web or change or even put it in the archive for no publishing in the future, only for the archives. So I think
we started discussing, all of us together, this event before the 7th of October this year, and planning it and setting it up. And I wonder now, how did you experience October 7th this year, 2024, and the days around, maybe? Yael, you were in Potsdam for your fellowship. Rana, you were in Jerusalem. Did you partake in commemorations? Maybe this is also a question for you, Miriam. You partake in commemorations. What did you think about the official events marking the date in Israel, but also maybe here in Germany? And maybe also the question, how does it affect you when people here on that day deny that massacres happen, or when supposedly pro-Palestinian demonstrations on this day exclaim glory to the resistance? And how did the ongoing war in Gaza and in Lebanon, and rockets on Israel, and the terror attack in Yaffo that day, so very much the presence, the ongoing presence, weigh in on commemorating, mourning what happened that day, the people who lost their lives, were injured, were taken hostages.
Yeah, I don't think we're commemorating anything yet. I mean, you were asked if people our witnesses are in trauma, and of course they went through hell and much more than that. But we are, all of the society in Israel is under trauma. We don't even grasp that. And the day of the Iranian attack, the day after was the eve of Rosh Hashanah, of the Jewish New Year. And I met a friend, everybody went shopping, and I told her, yes, that, you know, you remember in the evening of the Iranian attack, and she looked at me and it's like, Rana, it was last night. So we're all in trauma. We're all, it's not post-trauma, we're still there. I don't even know if it's trauma. We're still in the experience. As Yael said, I think, I mean, time stopped in a way at October 7 to 2023. And all we're trying to do is just move forward somehow within this limbo. So, I mean, we gave talks on around October 7 because we wanted to make our testimonies more, you know, to have people know about our organization. So we gave talks, and we went to, you know, public, you know, hearings and viewings and stuff like that. We did what we needed to do. As we do everything that we need to do. We wake up in the morning, take care of our kids, bring them to school, we live. But it's not the full life. So I don't know about commemorating or even grieving. No one can grieve yet. As long as there are more than 100 Israelis kidnapped in Gaza, and no one is doing anything to bring them back. I mean, they're not back yet. So I don't know. I don't think we can talk even about mourning or processing anything yet.
I participated or viewed 2 events in Potsdam on October 7th. One was the official state and Jewish community in Potsdam, which was I would say my own views, because I find it harder to sympathize with any formal event. So it's in a way reflected in what we do here, because in person, I object to the government and everything that is happening in the state. So I cannot, like, I would support the people, but I cannot talk in the name of the state I belong to. And then and also it was in German, and I don't really speak German. I can only understand the sentiment. Like I can get enough words and sentiment to understand what was being said. And then I also participated in the evening in Antifa, like anti-war in Potsdam, a smaller event, which was a bit different. And by the way, they also put testimonies, like not art testimonies, but other testimonies of survivors. So this was something like I could more feel like saying my voice. And in parallel, there were 2 events in Israel. One was like a televised event, which was supposed to be very big and public, but because of the war and the attacks now, could not be with a big crowd in the park. So it was of the families of the killed and the kidnapped. And after that, there was a formal event of the government, which was televised in advance, was filmed in advance. So this was, I think, a good mirror of the situation. So like there are, where we live in two separate, I say we, I don't know who is this we, but there is an existence of two very, very different narratives of what is going on, what happened, what is being remembered, how it is being remembered. So I think both in Potsdam and in Israel, I saw that in a way. Although I would not say that I felt very estranged in the formal event of Potsdam. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll try to be brief. I didn't go to any of these events because somehow, maybe listening to you, I was wondering, maybe it's also because of this feeling that we are still in the middle of it. And I don't feel comfortable with the events in Germany expressing this almost blind solidarity with what the state, the government of Israel is doing. So I didn't feel like going to any of these solidarity events, but I felt like I needed to do something. So what I did was talking with everyone in Israel and exchanging signal messages and getting pictures from there, from these ceremonies, and well, feeling a bit foreign in my own country, so to speak. But what scholars also do is start reading. So that's kind of what I did prepare this event, for example, and think maybe that's a step, just as you do this project, maybe for us bringing together this event is a way of processing the Jahrzeit and what we experienced. And I'll maybe add just a few words because we should probably then also open. I'm really fascinated by this project, and as you know, in our preparatory conversations, I said as a scholar, and also Rana agreed, we would probably step back and think, okay, what's the method, what's the source, what's, I don't know, the motivation behind it, how do we open it up to what's the scale of group that we research? But this was really eye-opening what you now said, this that we are still in the middle of it. And as a historian working with these different corpora, I mentioned the Fortunov archive, and Dori Laub was mentioned. We have Axel Dossmann here, who works with the Boder archive, who's also, and if we look at Dori Laub, he himself was Jewish. David Boder, who did interviews in the displaced persons camps right after the war in 46, was a survivor, so to speak. I mean, he was an emigre from Eastern Europe. So we have this whole, and the founder of Fortunov himself also was a survivor, if I'm correct. So we have these different bodies of archival documents that are kind of your blueprint, that are all coming from trauma and from people coping with trauma. But the one difference I see is that what you just said, that we are still in the middle of it, or you are more in the middle of it. So I was wondering, maybe then I would finish with a question of how you see this, because the projects, as I see it from Fortunov and Boder, they had also one big goal, like Ringelblume with his documents archive, to document and to give proof for those who will deal and retaliate in the legal sense or in the historical sense with what has happened. And they did not have any psychological ideas behind it yet. But your project somehow is different because you also see it as a trauma work for yourself. So maybe you could say a few words of what you learned and how far you maybe see it very different from what Boder and Fortunov did, or similar.
I will answer in a technical way again. So I'm thinking about it like from the archive point of view. So that's the notion of archives of the present, or So it's not the first time that it happens, but there are some examples of events that were of trauma and that happened to a lot of people, like the 9/11 event or the Katrina hurricane. So it's like things happen, and while it is happening with the digital age, there is a documentation, and then there's like an immediate need to document. And on the other hand, look at it as an archivist and think about archives are usually have some kind of a gap between the time when the documents are being collected and then being used or even registered. And here there's no gap. So this is the way I can handle it is like of saying, okay, I'm in the event and this is what I can do is like bring the present and understand the future. So like work on this gap. And so it's like, that's my my take on it, like less theoretical maybe in the content, but in the purpose. So I'll go on.
Yeah. I mean, as a legal scholar, the question of testimony is always very contentious. Like, we don't like oral testimonies. Neither historians nor lawyers, no one likes oral testimonies because they can't be trusted and the human memory is all fraught. So I'm not looking at this body of testimony as something that will help any legal action. There is a police unit that does that, and it's their job, and they've tried to reach out to us several times, but we don't want that because we don't want to put our witnesses to the prosecution or to the, to this game of cross-examination and building a case. It's contrary to what we're trying to do in a way. And yet I think that if we think about the construction of collective memory, I mean, you think of the Eichmann trial where the testimonies really served as the catalyst of a collective memory of the Holocaust in Israel. I don't know yet who will construct the national memory of October 7. It's already full of tension, let's say, very delicately. And I want to create an archive of testimonies that will enable people to listen to them and build their own narrative of what happened there. And not out of any agenda that I have or that the archive, I mean, we're not a political body, we're not a partisan body. We're an organization with 400 volunteers that come from very different points of view and parts of society. And what brings us together is, the commitment to let the witnesses tell the story in a way that will allow each and every one of us as a creator, as a scholar, as a historian, to later come and listen to this archive and construct the narrative that they, not they believe in, but that, that they find in these stories. So for me, that's the work that we do in the present in order to make something for the future, for my kids to know what happened on October 7. It will be contested. I have no doubt about it, unfortunately.
Thank you. I would like to open this up to questions from the floor, from the audience. We have about 15 minutes, I guess, 20 minutes. The gentleman here.
Thank you. My name is Tomas Tasowitz. I'm from the Digital Research Infrastructure for Arts and Humanities, so DARIA. I have two small questions, one both out of curiosity. One is, are all the interviews conducted in Hebrew? Is there multilingual content? Is there Arabic? Is there, a Filipino agricultural worker that you speak to, etc.? And how does that affect the process and the archiving and the metadata? And the second question is more of I'm a little puzzled by your decision to make these 5-minute condensed narratives. While I appreciate them because we could actually have these incredibly moving experience in a short amount of time, I can see why one would want to do it. But the pedantic academic in me is rebelling a little bit, because the quote unquote authenticity of the testimony is immediately brought into question. So all the edits, all the missing silences, all the signs of, call it trauma or whatever, that actually shine through an authentic conversation are lost here. So if you can tell us just a little bit about why you did it, and yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can start answering to the second part of the question. I think part of what we wanted to do, and this is what we discussed before, is we wanted to show a little bit of the diversity of the archive. And that meant that within 20 minutes, we wouldn't be able to show a long clip or a long testimony, but we would have to sort of show shortened, abbreviated clips. And yeah, I think that was sort of an offset that we accepted to show a little bit everything that is in the archive. But I think it's worthwhile to actually look at entire testimonies.
So you're right. We're the moment we edit, either if it's the text that accompanies each testimony and tells the story in a shortened way, that's done by my department, the volunteers in the content editing department, and whether it's the video editing, it's all interpretation, always. I'm not afraid of interpretation. The raw materials are there, and the full version is there. Each clip of a shortened version leads to a full version. And we invite people, we encourage people to watch the full version. That's exactly the several hats that the archive has. It's not an academic archive per se, or not only an academic archive per se. It adheres to the highest, standards of digital humanities, the best practices of digital humanities, but it also wants to make stories accessible. And I can tell you that in the Nahal Oz community, where we have a very strong collaboration with the community. As a community, we have a volunteer in our organization that is a member of this community, and they show the clips of this 5 minutes on their Facebook channel of the kibbutz the moment we finish editing them. It's a tool for the community to understand what happened to it. So yes, from a Puritan point of view, of course, you just want to show the raw material, not even to cut out the, how you place the mic and how you, it's all there. It's all there. We keep everything. But we also want to make the stories accessible for the communities, for the individuals, and for you guys to, please go ahead and see the full testimony. Unfortunately, we at the moment only translate only the shortened versions, but that's because of financial compromise, that we just don't have enough money to pay for the full translation. It costs a lot of money, so you're welcome to help us. Sorry for being a schnoll. Yes, but that's, and about the multilingual, wow, that's a really big question. Maybe we talk about it offline. It's really, for example, we do take testimonies in the dialogue. We find the volunteers that will interview in that language. And then we start to think, where do we put it in the archive? Under English, under Hebrew, under original language? And it's a whole fun that Yael and Karen have to play with it and break their heads, and no one understands why they spend so much time on that until they realize that, that's important. So,
yeah. Yes, and I just want to add about the editing. I think that beyond the ability to share in social networks, I think that one of the motivations to do that was also to give like an indication, that is to make like an indicative summarization of the content, for the thought like that there are in Fortuna for archive, there are 4,000 videos, and nobody, and it is most probable that there are a lot of videos that were never viewed. So in a way, like, from people who did, who belonged to the first initiator, thought already that they want all testimonies to have an access point, which then it is being aided by the full transcription. So you can do a full text search or analysis, topic modeling, whatever, like other access points you can do. And I think languages, which is also relates to both sides, one to the question of archives of the present, where we want to put that everyone would be able to give testimony, but then maybe we don't notice that there were like Thai people who were present and they did not testify, or maybe we don't have enough in Arabic, and giving a testimony in Hebrew for Arabic speakers, it's not the same as in Arabic. So, but this the metadata helps us because we can do all kinds of like visualization. So I have a map, we can see which places were not. I know categories of the locations, so I know if it's a kibbutz or a mashav or a city. So we can make some, kind of see how many languages do we have, where do we miss. So it's a kind of a process that there is at least an effort. But since, like, if we don't have Arabic able to do that. So of course, this is part of a conversation. Yes, thank you.
Then I think you had a question right next. Yeah, and then could all the people who also had questions just raise their arms so that I can have a bit of an overview? 1, 2, okay. So we'll take those 3 questions together, and then we can go into.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your fantastic work you do for all of us, I think. I didn't get whether there were interviewees not wishing to be published. What do you do with them? Do you have a second archive? This is the question.
Thank you also. I just wanted to ask, did I understand that if I see just the 5 minutes and I would like from that 5 minutes look at the whole interview, this is possible? Okay.
Okay, so very quickly, there are those that consent only to being archived and not shown publicly. So for future research, and then we just don't publish them. They're not on the YouTube, on the website, they're just on our driver. And one day they will be available for research if this person consented. If they say that they just don't want the testimony to be available ever because that's it, then it's just erased from our drivers and that's it. Your question was, yes, of course, sorry, I'm sorry. Yes, you can. What I mentioned about the translation is that we didn't translate yet to the the other languages, but you can always go on our website and it's through YouTube. Yael will show it in a second. And you can always press the automatic translation, even if you want. It's not good, but it's but the full testimony is out there, always linked to the short testimony. So yes.
Hi, my name is Katja. I would really like to know how do they support you and how do they help you? And I would also like to know, I heard that there are more kind of collection projects in Israel. And I think the first testimonial that I saw were somehow supported or made, I don't know really, by the Shoah Foundation, also with people of Kvaza. And what do you think, can all those different collections and hubs work together, even if they maybe are made differently? Or also those collections of Twitter and kind like that. And then the role of the National Library, maybe if they say that they are the hub of all those documentations. Thank you.
Yeah, so, right, there are two things from quite the beginning. One was because there are like many initiations, like civil ones. So a group of also researchers from the universities, or not only the university, founded a forum of civil initiations for documentation, and there were a few meetings of it, and we have a Google WhatsApp group. Yeah, WhatsApp group is the WhatsApp are the only, like, everything happens that, and there's by the way, an initiation to document all the WhatsApp communication from the October 7th in the kibbutzim and the moshavim. So this,
collaborate with them.
Yes.
Testimonies and WhatsApp.
Yeah.
That's exactly what
Yeah.
we try to do.
So there are a lot of initiations, and also from the beginning, the National Library tried to get into and also make like collect as a national institution, and they officially have like a unified collection of corporations, and now it comes in two working groups, in a form of two working groups. One that discusses the ethics of collections and what to collect, how to collect, how to keep the privacy of people, and these kind of aspects. And the other thing is about the metadata. So like for all, how to make like a uniform or unified, at least for sharing and communication of information. So it started quite in the beginning, even with witnesses. So let's share like who gave testimonies in our initiation. So not everyone will go and ask them again to get a testimony. This wasn't very easy to handle because most groups don't have good metadata to share, or this kind of how to put it all together. But now there's like this effort to make common metadata. So not all initiations, also even an authority. So that's like a collection of all, for instance, people killed on October 7th. So we can communicate with them. So this is really, it is a good hub. And they will, if like once we cooperate with them, they also guarantee long-term preservation. Again, it is important for the raw material. We put it in Google Drive, and then we don't know if Google will not change its policy and close the drive, and we lose everything. So it is an.
Well, now we also have a physical backup in my office.
Just
sitting on my desk.
But then on the other hand, it's always a question: do we want like the state to be part of it, or is it an independent? So it's always a tension, also in the organization itself. Like, what do we care more about, the long-term preservation or about our independence as a non-governmental organization? But I think we tend to, whoever will promise us that this will be kept in and preserved, then we can cooperate. Yeah.
This reminds me of one aspect that we didn't speak of yet, which brings us back to the Halle event, which is also very closely linked in Germany with the trauma of the migrants who were killed in Hanau only a few months later. And the question of legitimization and representation or recognition of trauma and of pain. And I think that's probably something that you are also struggling for, maybe more in the future, but it can be heard between the lines. At least I already hear it, because who owns the history and the talking and the narratives of pain and what is represented by it or not. So when you talk about your grassroots and not a state organization, etc. So that's maybe, but that's luckily discussions more for the future to lead and not for now. No, they are relevant now already.
I think every Saturday well, every day almost, but almost every Saturday when there is a protest and the families of the kidnapped are treated as traitors and enemies of the state, the question of pain and who the pain belongs to is acutely relevant, unfortunately. So yes, not good times.
If there aren't any last, a very last question, very brief and very.
A little bit difficult to ask, but you're doing something like a scientific investigation. I can't imagine then that in Israel you can do something like that without having a political opinion. I don't know if you want to answer to that, but
we all have political opinions, but I'm happy to share them offline. But I don't think, again, as the Edut 710 is not a political organization, and I'm not saying it as a, just to, bypass a difficult question. The whole idea is that we really try to do something that is above the politics and is open to everybody and anybody. And, if it's the Bedouins that rescued the Jews or the Jews that fled from the party or the foreign migrant workers, everybody should have a place to tell their story. And that's what we care about. For me, the telling of the stories and listening to them, that's the most humanistic at the moment. When we get a chance to, listen to the stories of those that are in Gaza, it will only make the world a better place. That we can put all these stories together in one archive. That would be, for me, the, the beginning of a new era, maybe, hopefully. So I'm waiting for this day.
So on these very beautiful words, that only leaves me with thanking you for presenting all the work that you have been doing, presenting these testimonies to us, showing everything that can come out of civil engagement, which I a passion for which we also at the New Israel Fund share. I would like to thank Miriam for initiating this conversation between scholarship and civil society, which I think is very important that these formats are carried out. And I would like to thank Inga Boyesen, who was very enthusiastic from the very beginning and gave us the space and also the technological abilities to carry this out with a live stream, and for all the staff that helped out tonight. Thank you very much, everybody who came as well and participated.